The satellite feed flickered twice before going dark. Mission control at Ramstein Air Base fell into a confused silence as the operators stared at screens filled with static. Somewhere over the Koringal Valley, an entire convoy had vanished from every tracking system NATO possessed. 23 vehicles, 87 personnel. Gone. The last transmission had been fragmentary, garbled by interference that shouldn't exist in that airspace. Someone had screamed about shadows moving through the tree line. Then nothing. The valley had swallowed them whole, and in the operations room 5,000 miles away, a colonel named Briggs pressed his palms flat against the table and tried to calculate acceptable losses. He couldn't. The mathematics of war had failed him. Outside, the German sunrise painted the runway in shades of amber and blood. Captain Nadia, Revenant Kowalski, stood beside her, Thunderbolt II, running her hand along the weathered titanium bathtub that encased the cockpit. The aircraft looked ancient compared to the sleek F-35s parked 3 hangars down. Its nose was dented. The GAU-8 Avenger cannon protruding from its belly bore scorch marks from 1,000 runs. Someone had spray-painted kill markers near the tail section years ago, then tried to scrub them off, leaving ghost impressions in the paint. She'd requested this particular bird specifically, not because it was pretty, because it refused to die. They had that in common. Her crew chief, a specialist named Tors with grease permanently embedded under his fingernails, watched her with something between concern and reverence. He'd heard the stories. Everyone had. 3 years ago, Kowalski had been flying humanitarian missions over Syria when her entire squadron got ambushed by surface-to-air missiles. She'd been the only one who made it back, limping home on one engine with half her hydraulics shot to hell. The official report called it luck. The pilots who'd seen the gun camera footage called it something else. They'd watched her thread between mountain passes at speeds that should have torn her wings off, watched her draw fire away from a downed pilot's position, watched her refuse to leave anyone behind even when command ordered her to bug out. She'd saved 4 lives that day, lost her wingman doing it. Now they called her Revenant, the one who returns, the one who doesn't stay dead. Tors handed her the pre-flight checklist without a word. She didn't need it. Hadn't needed it in 700 flight hours, but ritual mattered. Ritual kept you honest. She took the clipboard, their fingers touching briefly, and she saw the question in his eyes, the one nobody wanted to ask, the one that hovered over every mission brief like smoke. Are you okay? She wasn't. Hadn't been for 3 years. But okay was a luxury you couldn't afford at 30,000 feet with ordnance under your wings. The briefing room had been thick with skepticism when they'd announced she'd be flying solo rescue. Not because of her skill. Everyone knew she could fly. But the Koringal was a graveyard. Soviet helicopters still rusted in its ravines from wars that predated her birth. The valley didn't care about your training or your courage. It took everything equally. A major named Patterson had actually laughed when her name appeared on the roster. Revenant. They're sending ghosts to find ghosts now. Nobody else had joined his laughter. They'd all seen what she could do. But seeing and believing occupied different territories, especially when the mission parameters read like a suicide note. Single aircraft. No support. Hostile airspace. Communications blackout. Find the convoy. Provide close air support. Extract if possible. The words "if possible" had been underlined twice in red ink. Kowalski had sat in the back of that briefing room, her flight suit still smelling faintly of jet fuel from the morning's training run, and she'd studied the topographical maps with an intensity that made the intelligence officer nervous. The valley was a maze of ridges and draws, each one a perfect ambush site. Thermal imaging showed scattered heat signatures, but they could be anything. Vehicles, campfires, bodies. The enemy had learned to mask their movements, to blend with the terrain until satellites couldn't distinguish them from shadows. Whoever had hit the convoy understood modern warfare's electronic dimensions. They jammed communications, spoofed GPS, and created a dead zone where American technology turned stupid and blind. This wasn't some ragtag insurgency. This was professional, calculated, terrifying. She'd raised her hand once during the brief. Rules of engagement. The colonel had hesitated before answering. Weapons free. Anything that threatens the convoy is hostile. Translation, make your own decisions and live with them, or don't live. Either way, the brass wouldn't be there to help. She'd nodded slowly, already running attack patterns through her mind, already visualizing the approach vector, already accepting that she might not come back. Again. Now, standing on the tarmac as dawn broke over Germany, she performed the walk-around inspection with Tors shadowing her steps. The Avenger cannon drew her attention like it always did. 7 barrels, 65 rounds per second, 30mm depleted uranium shells that could shred a tank like paper. The A-10 had been built around this gun, designed as a flying weapons platform that happened to have a cockpit attached. Every other fighter jet in the world prioritized speed and stealth. The Warthog prioritized violence, brutal, unstoppable, righteous violence. She ran her hand along the barrel housing, feeling the cold metal warm under her palm. Tors cleared his throat. "Ma'am, fuel's topped off. Ordnance is loaded. She's ready." He paused. "You sure about going in alone?" Kowalski met his eyes. "I'm never sure about anything, Tors, but those people in the valley don't have time for me to be sure." He nodded and stepped back, snapping a salute that she returned. Then she was climbing the ladder, settling into the cockpit that had become more familiar than her own apartment. The seat remembered her shape. The controls fell under her hands like old friends. She ran through startup procedures with mechanical precision, listening to the twin turbofan engines cough to life behind her. The Warthog wasn't fast, wasn't elegant. But when you needed something dead and everything else had failed, you called the A-10. You called Revenant. The tower cleared her for takeoff with unusual brevity. They knew what this was. Everyone knew. She advanced the throttles and felt the aircraft lumber forward, picking up speed with the grudging acceleration of a truck loaded with explosives. Because that's what she was. A flying truck full of death, heading toward a valley where Americans were dying in silence. The runway lights blurred past. The nose lifted. And then she was airborne, climbing into a sky that didn't care about human struggles, carrying enough firepower to level a city block. The flight east took 4 hours. She refueled twice from tankers that appeared and disappeared like mechanical angels, their crews offering thumbs up through distant cockpit windows. She didn't return the gesture, couldn't afford the distraction. Instead, she reviewed the mission brief on her kneeboard, memorizing frequencies and checkpoint coordinates that might already be obsolete. The core angle was fluid. What applied this morning might be suicidal by afternoon. Flexibility meant survival. Rigidity meant you joined the wreckage rotting in the valley floor. As she crossed into Afghan airspace, the radio traffic changed, became clipped, urgent. Other pilots reported mechanical issues that forced them to turn back, suspicious weather patterns, sensor malfunctions. She understood what was happening. They were being warned off. Someone didn't want NATO aircraft in that valley, and they had the electronic warfare capability to make it unpleasant. She checked her own instruments, everything nominal, for now. But she'd learned not to trust gauges. Learned to trust her hands on the stick, the pressure feedback through the rudder pedals, the sound of the engines behind her head. Machines lied. Your body told the truth. Cobra 26, Ramstein Control. The voice crackled through her headset, distant and laced with static. Ramstein 26, go ahead. Be advised, target area remains communications dark. Last known position of convoy is grid reference Juliet Tango 479er2. Proceed with extreme caution. Weather is deteriorating. She glanced at the sky ahead. Clear, painfully clear. They weren't talking about clouds. Copy Ramstein 26 proceeding to target area. Will report findings. Roger 26, good hunting. The controller paused, and Nadia, come home. First name protocol violation. She smiled despite everything. Always do, Ramstein 26 out. The mountains rose ahead like the spine of some ancient beast, snow-capped peaks cutting into the sky with indifferent cruelty. She descended to 8,000 feet, low enough to see details but high enough to maintain maneuverability. The A-10 handled like a pregnant cow at high altitude, but down here it became responsive, almost eager. She armed her weapons systems methodically. Maverick missiles, Hydra rockets, the gun, always the gun. Her thumb rested on the trigger, not pressing, just touching. Remembering. The valley opened before her like a wound in the earth. Steep walls on both sides, a dirt road snaking through the bottom, vegetation thick enough to hide an army, which it probably did. She switched her sensors to maximum gain and began her search pattern, flying a careful grid that kept her unpredictable. Predictable meant dead. The Taliban had learned that lesson from shooting down Soviet Hinds. They'd wait until you established a pattern, then fill that pattern with bullets. Her radio hissed with interference. She adjusted frequencies, but the static persisted, a blanket of white noise that isolated her completely, exactly as briefed. She was alone now, truly alone, no support, no guidance, just her and the valley and whatever was waiting down there. She felt her heartbeat slow, felt the familiar calm that came before violence. This was the part she'd never been able to explain to the psychologists. The moment when fear transformed into focus so sharp it hurt. When everything unnecessary fell away and all that remained was the mission, the people who needed her, the promise she'd made to never leave anyone behind. Then she saw them, smoke first. Black columns rising from 3 separate locations along the road. She banked toward the nearest, descending further, her eyes scanning for movement. The convoy vehicles were scattered like toys kicked by an angry child. Some burned, others sat intact but motionless. Bodies lay in the road. She counted 8 before forcing herself to stop. Math didn't matter. Living versus dead mattered. She keyed her radio out of habit, knowing nobody would answer. Any station, this is Cobra 26 on rescue frequency. If you can hear this, signal by smoke or mirror. Static wind in her microphone, the sound of her own breathing. Then, impossibly, a flicker from the tree line. Brief, controlled, Morse code reflected off a piece of broken glass. 3 dots, 3 dashes, 3 dots. SOS. The most desperate 3 letters in any language. She marked the position and climbed back to a safer altitude, her mind processing tactical options at lightning speed. They were pinned down, couldn't move without exposing themselves. The enemy held the high ground on both sides of the valley. Classic L-shaped ambush, devastatingly effective. Whoever planned this knew what they were doing, but they'd made one miscalculation. They'd assumed nobody would come, that the electronic warfare would keep rescue birds grounded. They hadn't counted on an A-10. Hadn't counted on Revenant. She studied the terrain with predator eyes. The ambush positions would be dug in, reinforced, probably with heavy weapons. Taking them out required precision and aggression in equal measure. The A-10 could absorb tremendous punishment, but it wasn't invincible. One golden BB in the wrong place and she'd be joining the wreckage. But fear was a luxury. Those soldiers in the tree line didn't have hours. Didn't have minutes, maybe. They had now. And now was what she had to give them. Kowalski rolled inverted and pulled the nose down, committing to the attack run with a finality that made her stomach float. The valley walls blurred past. Wind screamed over the canopy. She selected rockets and picked her first target, a cluster of boulders on the eastern ridge where muzzle flashes had sparkled moments before. Her finger found the trigger. The warthogs shuddered as rockets leapt from their pods, trailing smoke as they arced downward. Explosions stitched across the ridge like orange flowers blooming in fast motion. Rock and dirt fountained into the air. Then the valley erupted in return fire. Tracer rounds reached up toward her like deadly fireworks, some passing so close she could see them through the canopy. She jinked hard right, pulling G-forces that pressed her into the seat, then reversed left. The A-10 groaned but held together. Titanium bathtub doing its job. Something hit her left wing with a metallic bang that she felt through the airframe. She glanced at the wing, hole the size of a fist, but the wing stayed attached, fuel still flowing. She armed the gun. The GAU-8 Avenger spoke with the voice of God having a bad day. BRRRRRRRT, a sound so distinctive that soldiers on 5 continents recognized it instantly. The sound of salvation if you wore the right flag, the sound of death if you didn't. She walked the cannon fire across the western ridge, watching trees disintegrate, watching fighting positions that had taken days to build vanish in seconds. The depleted uranium rounds didn't just penetrate armor, they obliterated it. 30-millimeter explosive projectiles traveling at 3,000 feet per second. Nothing organic survived. Nothing mechanical functioned. Everything touched by that stream of metal ceased to exist in any meaningful way. She pulled up hard, climbing back to altitude as more fire reached toward her. Her heart hammered, but her hands stayed steady. This was the dance. Attack, evade, never staying still, never giving them a clean shot, making them react to her rather than planning their ambush. She'd flown this pattern in 3 different wars now, different enemies, same principles. Violence applied with precision beats violence applied with enthusiasm. Every time. The radio crackled suddenly. Aircraft overhead, identify. She keyed her mic instantly. Station calling, this is Cobra 26. Say again your traffic. 26, this is Reaper 17. We are pinned down in heavy vegetation, grid reference. The transmission dissolved into static. Reaper 17, I have your approximate position. Can you mark your location with smoke? -26, smoke will draw fire, we have wounded, multiple wounded, and the voice paused. She heard explosions in the background, screaming. They're coming again, say your ordnance. She ran the inventory automatically. 11 Mavericks, full rocket pods, 1,500 rounds of 30 mic, and more anger than they can handle. Mark your position by any means. I'll keep the bad guys busy. A different voice came through, younger, terrified but controlled. 26, Reaper 17 actual, popping red smoke now. Danger close. I say again, danger close. Friendlies within 50 meters of targets. Danger close. The words every close air support pilot dreaded and trained for relentlessly. It meant firing so close to friendly troops that the margin for error measured in feet rather than yards. One miscalculation and she'd kill the people she came to save. But not firing meant watching them die anyway. She spotted the red smoke billowing from the trees and immediately identified the enemy positions surrounding it. They'd formed a noose, tightening slowly, methodically, taking their time because they thought nobody was coming to help. They thought wrong. Kowalski selected a Maverick missile and locked onto a building 200 meters north of the smoke. Infrared showed heat signatures, lots of them. She squeezed the trigger and felt the missile drop away, its motor igniting as it accelerated toward the target. She didn't wait to watch impact, already rolling into position for the next run. The building exploded, the shockwave visible even from her altitude. Secondary explosions followed, ammunition cooking off. Good. Less ammunition to shoot at her and the people below. Reaper 17, splash 1, breaking left for another run, get your heads down. Copy 26, that was danger close, we felt the heat from here. Danger close is all I've got, Reaper, stand by. She came around again, this time from a different angle, never predictable, never complacent. The enemy was adjusting now, shifting positions, trying to figure out where she'd strike next. She showed them. The cannon roared again, chewing through a tree line where muzzle flashes had betrayed enemy positions. Wood and leaf and flesh became indistinguishable in the explosions. She didn't think about what the rounds were hitting, couldn't afford to. Target identification, threat assessment, engagement. The cycle repeated until threats stopped being threats. Her right engine coughed. Temperature warning lit up on the panel. She checked the gauges, oil pressure dropping. Something had hit the engine, not catastrophically, but enough to matter. She reduced throttle on that engine and compensated with the left. The A-10 shrugged off the damage like it was annoying rather than critical. This was what the Warthog did best. Absorbed punishment that would destroy any other aircraft and kept flying anyway. She'd heard stories of A-10's landing with one engine gone, half a wing missing, hydraulics failed, and the pilot walking away. The plane was designed around survivability, built by people who understood that wars were won by aircraft that came home. 26 Reaper 17. Enemy forces are withdrawing to the south. You broke their attack. We have 14 personnel, 6 wounded, 2 critical. Request immediate medevac. She was already running calculations. The valley had nowhere for a helicopter to land safely. Too narrow, too exposed. The enemy might be withdrawing, but they weren't beaten. They'd come back the moment she left. She keyed her mic. Reaper 2-6. Negative on ground medevac, too hot. Can you move your wounded 200 meters west? There's a clearing. I'll cover your movement and call in dust off. Copy 2-6. We're moving now. Please tell me you're not leaving. The question hung in the air between them. She looked at her fuel gauge. 30 minutes until she had to climb for the tanker. Maybe 20 if that engine kept degrading. She could make one more attack run. Maybe 2 if she was efficient. Then she'd have to choose between her mission and her life. But that wasn't really a choice. Not for Revenant. Reaper, I'm not going anywhere until you're safe. That's a promise. Now move your people. She established a racetrack pattern overhead, circling the convoy's position while her eyes swept the terrain for threats. The enemy had indeed pulled back, but she could see them regrouping on the southern ridges, planning, adapting. They'd be back with better tactics. Maybe with man-portable air defense systems they'd kept hidden until now. Every minute she stayed increased the risk. Every minute she left meant those soldiers died. Math didn't work in her favor, but since when had it ever? The radio squawked, different frequency. Ramstein control had punched through the jamming somehow. Cobra 2-6 Ramstein, we show you in the target area. Sitrep. Ramstein 2-6. Convoy located. 14 survivors, 6 wounded. Enemy forces engaged and temporarily suppressed. Requesting immediate dust-off at grid Juliet Tango 479er2. Clearing approximately 200 meters west of the road. Copy 2-6. Be advised nearest medevac is 30 minutes out. Can you maintain cover? She looked at her fuel gauge again. Looked at the temperature warning on her damaged engine. Looked at the southern ridge where enemy forces were massing for another attack. Ramstein 2-6 can maintain, but tell Dustoff to hurry. This is going to get ugly. Roger 2-6. Medical flight is inbound hot. Call sign Dustoff 87. They're being escorted by 2 Apache. Apache, attack helicopters, reinforcements. The thought should have brought relief. Instead, she felt only urgency. 30 minutes was eternity in combat. 30 minutes meant the enemy could bring up reinforcements, could bring up those MANPADS, could turn this valley into a shooting gallery where nothing survived. She needed to buy those 30 minutes. Buy them with violence and fury and whatever fuel remained in her tanks. The enemy didn't wait. They came from 3 directions simultaneously, a coordinated assault that spoke to professional military training. Small arms fire from the ridges, RPGs from the road, and something new, something that made her blood run cold. A streak of white smoke rising from the southern ridge, heading directly toward her. Surface-to-air missile. Training took over. She punched out flares while braking hard left, pulling G-forces that made her vision narrow and gray. The missile followed, tracking on her heat signature despite the flares. Proximity fused. Radar guided. Russian-made, probably. She pulled harder, tighter, feeling the airframe protest. The missile passed 20 feet beneath her belly, close enough to see it, close enough to feel its exhaust heat. It detonated above her, shrapnel peppering her underside with metallic rain. Alarms screamed in the cockpit. She silenced them with practiced slaps at buttons, hydraulic pressure dropping, flight controls compromised. The A-10 was hurt, actually hurt, but it kept flying, kept responding to her inputs. She looked at the ridge where the missile had originated, spotted the launch team reloading. They'd get one more shot. She'd make sure they never got a third. The Avenger cannon answered her trigger pull with that terrible, beautiful sound. BRRRRRRRRT. The ridge exploded. The launch team vanished in smoke and fire and shredded earth. She didn't feel satisfaction. Didn't feel anything except the cold professional need to eliminate threats. They'd tried to kill her. She'd succeeded in killing them. That was the mathematics of air combat. Binary. Absolute. 2-6 Reaper 1-7. We're in position at the clearing, but they're coming again. Lots of them. She could see it from altitude. Enemy forces moving through the trees like ants, converging on the clearing where the survivors had gathered. She counted 30, 40, maybe more. They wanted to finish this before the helicopters arrived, wanted to eliminate the witnesses, turn the convoy into another unsolved mystery in a valley full of ghosts. Not today. Kowalski rolled into a dive that was too steep, too fast, too aggressive. Every book said never exceed 60 degrees. She pushed 70. The airspeed indicator climbed past red line. The Warthog shook like it was coming apart. Maybe it was, she didn't care. She armed everything. Missiles, rockets, gun. This was it. All her chips on the table. All her fury compressed into 30 seconds of ordnance delivery. She fired at 400 feet. Close enough to see faces looking up at her. Close enough to be part of the explosion she created. Rockets and missiles transformed the tree line into a wall of fire. She pulled through her own shock wave, felt it buffet the aircraft, felt something tear loose in the right wing. Then she was climbing, engine screaming, airframe groaning, warning lights painting the cockpit red and yellow and angry orange. The silence afterward was profound. The enemy force simply ceased to exist as a cohesive unit. Those who could scattered, those who couldn't stayed down. She leveled off at 3,000 feet and assessed the damage. Right engine dead, hydraulics at 20%, fuel leaking from the damaged wing. 10 minutes to empty tank at current rate. The A-10 was dying. Reaper 1726, clearing is secure. Dust-off will be on station in 15. I have to RTB. -26. The voice was firm, certain. You don't leave until those helicopters arrive. That's an order. She smiled despite the situation. Reaper, you can't give me orders. Wrong rank. I can when you're saving my life. 10 more minutes, Captain. Give us 10 more minutes. She looked at her fuel gauge. 5 minutes until the wing ran dry. Maybe 7 if she was lucky. The math didn't work, but she thought about that gunship in Syria, the one she'd been unable to save. The wingman who'd called for help while she'd been forced to climb away, fuel too low, weapons expended, unable to do anything but listen to him die. She'd promised herself then. Never again. Never leave someone behind because the numbers didn't add up. Copy Reaper, 10 more minutes. Those 10 minutes stretched like centuries. She flew slow circles overhead, nursing the dying engine, watching the fuel gauge drop toward empty. The left engine would keep her flying. Barely. At reduced power, she could maybe glide back to Bagram Air Base. Maybe. But the mission wasn't at Bagram. It was here, in this valley, protecting these people until relief arrived. The enemy tried one more time, a final desperate rush from the east. She met them with the last of her ammunition. The Avenger roared until its magazine ran dry. 1,800 rounds expended. The barrel glowed cherry red in her mirrors. She'd fired everything, thrown everything she had at the darkness gathering around those soldiers, and it had been enough. 2 A-64 Apache roared into the valley like angry mechanical wasps. Behind them, the medical Black Hawk descended toward the clearing with practiced precision. The survivors marked their position with smoke. The helicopter landed, rotors never stopping, crew chiefs already reaching for wounded. 3 minutes later it lifted off, banking hard and fast toward safety. The lead Apache pilot came up on her frequency. Cobra 26, Viper 11, we have the area, you are cleared to RTB. She looked at her fuel gauge, 3 minutes, maybe 4. Viper 11, I'm running on fumes, need a tanker immediately. Copy 26. Texaco 92 is holding at your 12 o'clock, 20 miles, Angels 20. Can you make it? 20 miles, climbing on one engine with fuel leaking. She ran the numbers and came up with answer she didn't like. Viper, it's going to be close. 26 will escort you out, stay with us. The 3 aircraft turned north together, climbing slowly, painfully toward the tanker that represented survival. Her fuel gauge touched empty. The left engine coughed. She switched to reserve tank, knowing it held maybe 90 seconds of flight time. Maybe. The mountains passed beneath her, beautiful and indifferent and deadly. If she went down out here, it would take weeks to find her. Months, maybe never. The tanker appeared on her horizon like a miracle. A KC-135 Stratotanker loitering at 20,000 feet, trailing its refueling boom like a mechanical lifeline. She called them up. Texaco 92, Cobra 26 is emergency fuel. Request immediate plug. 26, Texaco has you visual. Come up and take a drink. She guided the wounded warthog behind the tanker, fighting flight controls that barely responded, managing power on an engine that could quit any second. The boom operator guided her in with practice calls. Forward 1, up 2, left 1, hold what you have. The boom touched her refueling receptacle. Locked. Fuel began flowing. She closed her eyes briefly, allowed herself one shuddering breath, allowed herself to feel the fear she'd been suppressing for 90 minutes. Then she opened her eyes and became professional again. Texaco 26 is taking fuel. You guys are lifesavers. 26 Texaco, you can buy us beers when we get home. That was some impressive flying down there. She didn't respond. Impressive was dropping bombs on helpless targets. What she'd done was necessary. There was a difference. When her tanks were full, she disconnected and radioed Bagram. Bagram Tower, Cobra 26, inbound, single engine, hydraulics compromised, requesting priority landing. Cobra 26 Bagram, cleared straight in. Runway is yours, emergency equipment standing by. The landing was ugly but effective. She touched down hard, the damaged right landing gear collapsing immediately. The warthog slid to the right, sparks fountaining from the wings scraping concrete. She fought the controls, kept the nose straight, brought the wounded bird to a grinding, screeching stop halfway down the runway. Fire trucks converged from 3 directions. She shut down the remaining engine and sat in the sudden silence, hands still gripping the stick, unwilling to believe she was actually on the ground. Torres appeared at her ladder. His face was pale. "Captain, what the hell did you do to my airplane?" She looked at him and started laughing. Couldn't help it. Stress and adrenaline and relief combining into something that sounded hysterical even to her ears. "Your airplane just saved 14 lives, Torres. I think she earned some scars." He climbed up and helped her from the cockpit, his hands gentle despite the gruff exterior. Her legs shook as she descended the ladder. Normal, adrenaline crash. She'd been running on pure nervous system override for 2 hours. Now the bill came due. Torres caught her as her knees buckled. "I got you, ma'am, I got you." She leaned on him briefly, then forced herself upright. Pilots didn't show weakness, especially not female pilots, especially not ones with call signs like Revenant. She looked at her aircraft. The right wing looked like Swiss cheese. The engine was scorched black. Hydraulic fluid pooled beneath the fuselage. By all rights, the plane should be scrap, but it had brought her home. "Can you fix her?" Torres studied the damage with professional eyes. "Yeah, take about 2 weeks, maybe 3. She's tough, like her pilot." He paused. "They're saying you went in alone, stayed until the medevac arrived. Is that true?" "Someone had to." "They're saying you killed about 80 enemy combatants, single-handedly." She turned away from the aircraft, from Tor's questioning eyes, from the crowd gathering to see the damaged warthog. "I didn't kill anyone, Torres. I just made sure the right people went home today." That night she sat in the debriefing room while colonels and intelligence officers asked questions. She answered in monotone. Yes, she'd engaged multiple targets. Yes, she'd operated in communications blackout. Yes, she'd continued the mission despite aircraft damage. Yes, she'd remained on station despite emergency fuel state. The questions went on for hours. She gave them facts, coordinates, ordnance expenditure, times and altitudes and target descriptions. She did not give them her fear. Did not give them the moment when she'd thought the missile would hit. Did not give them the face of the young soldier whose voice had broken over the radio saying, "Please don't leave us." Colonel Briggs dismissed everyone else and closed the door. He sat across from her, this man who'd sent her into the valley, and he looked older than he had that morning. "Nadia, what you did today was extraordinary, but it was also insane. You could have died a dozen different ways. So could they, sir? Difference is I had options, they didn't. He nodded slowly. The survivors are calling you an angel, said you appeared out of nowhere and wouldn't leave until they were safe. The senior NCO, Sergeant Paulson, he wants to meet you. Thank you personally. Not necessary, sir. Maybe not, but I'm going to arrange it anyway. People need heroes, Captain, especially right now, especially in this war that doesn't seem to have a point anymore. He stood and offered his hand. Damn fine work today, damn fine. She shook his hand and left before he could see her eyes water. Walked through the night air toward her quarters past other pilots who watched her with something that might have been respect or might have been fear. Hard to tell. She reached her room, locked the door, and sat on the edge of her bunk. Her hands still shook. Her flight suit still smelled like smoke and fear and cordite. She should shower, should eat, should sleep. Instead, she thought about Patterson, the major who'd laughed when they'd announced her name. She wondered if he was laughing now. Wondered if he'd ever understand that competence had nothing to do with what the evaluators wrote in your file and everything to do with who refused to quit when the gauges read empty and the valley filled with tracer fire. The next morning she met Sergeant Paulson in the base medical facility. He was 23 years old, had a wife and infant daughter he'd never met. His left arm was bandaged, shrapnel from an RPG. He stood when she entered, tried to salute, winced with pain. "Ma'am, I wanted to thank you for what you did yesterday." She waved off the salute. "How are your people?" 6 wounded will recover. 8 walked away clean. 2 are critical but stable. That's everyone, ma'am. Everyone came home because you wouldn't leave. His voice cracked. We thought we were dead. We'd made peace with it. Then we heard that gun, that sound, and we knew someone was fighting for us. She didn't know what to say, had never been good with gratitude. I was just doing my job, Sergeant. No, ma'am. Your job was close air support. What you did was refuse to let us die. That's different, that's something else. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a challenge coin. This was my grandfather's. He flew Phantoms in Vietnam. I want you to have it. She tried to refuse, but he pressed it into her hand. The coin was worn smooth, loved, carried through decades and wars. She closed her fingers around it and felt the weight of what he was really giving her. Not metal, trust, belief, the knowledge that someone had kept their promise. I'll take care of it. And Sergeant, hug your daughter. Tell her every day that you love her. Don't wait until you think you have time. That's the real job. He nodded, tears streaming down his face now, not ashamed. She left him there and walked back to the flight line where Torres and his crew had already begun repairs on her aircraft. The right wing was stripped down to internal structure. The engine had been removed. It looked like a skeleton, like something dead, but she knew better. Knew the Warthog would fly again. Knew she'd fly again. Knew that somewhere another convoy was rolling into another valley and eventually someone would call for help. And Revenant would answer. 3 days later, the award ceremony happened without her knowledge. She was in the simulator, running approach patterns when Torres found her. "Captain, you're wanted at base operations. Now, and you might want to put on a clean uniform." She emerged from the simulator confused, changed quickly, and walked to base operations wondering what administrative issue needed immediate attention. Instead, she found herself standing at attention while Colonel Briggs read from a citation she couldn't quite process. The words included extreme courage and disregard for personal safety and exemplary airmanship. A general she'd never met pinned the Distinguished Flying Cross to her chest while cameras flashed and pilots she barely knew applauded. Afterward, Patterson approached her, the major who'd laughed. He looked uncomfortable. "Captain Kowalski, I owe you an apology. I was wrong about you. I hope you'll accept it." She studied him, saw genuine contrition in his eyes. "Major, we all have opinions. Mine is that talk means nothing. Actions mean everything, so no apology needed. Just remember that the next time you judge someone based on their file instead of their ability." He nodded and walked away. She found Torres later, sitting by her aircraft, working on the hydraulic system. Tours, did you know about that ceremony? Everyone knew, ma'am, except you. They wanted it to be a surprise. I hate surprises. He grinned. You love flying. You tolerate everything else. That's what makes you a pilot instead of a person in a pilot costume. She laughed despite herself. When will she fly? Week and a half, maybe sooner if I skip sleep. He patted the wounded wing. She's telling me she wants back in the fight, can hear it. Machines don't talk, Tours. This one does, you just have to listen right. He looked at her seriously. Ma'am, people are talking. They're saying you're the best close air support pilot in theater, maybe in the entire Air Force. People say a lot of things. They're saying other stuff too, saying you're reckless, saying you take unnecessary risks, saying one day your luck will run out. She was quiet for a moment, watching mechanics swarm over her aircraft like surgeons. Tours, luck has nothing to do with it. I'm alive because I'm good at my job and because this airplane refuses to quit. The day either one of those things changes, you're right. My luck runs out. But until then, I fly. That's all I know how to do. That night, alone in her quarters, she opened her personal laptop and typed an email she'd been avoiding for 3 years. The cursor blinked in the address field. She typed a name, hit backspace, typed it again. Finally, she wrote, I don't know if you'll read this, don't know if you should, but I need you to understand something. I didn't abandon him, I couldn't reach him. The fuel was gone. The missiles were empty. I tried. God, I tried. But the math didn't work, and by the time I came back with support, it was too late. I think about that day every time I fly, every time I hear a pilot call for help, every time I promise someone I won't leave. I know you'll never forgive me. I don't forgive myself. But I wanted you to know that I'm still flying, still fighting, still refusing to let the math decide who lives, because maybe that's the only apology that matters. She read it 3 times, deleted it, closed the laptop. Some wounds didn't heal with words. Some promises you kept with actions. She lay on her bunk and stared at the ceiling until sleep came, fitful and full of radio calls from voices she couldn't help. The next mission came 6 days later. Different valley, same war, same request, convoy under fire, air support requested. She strapped into the repaired, knotting the new metal patches on the wing, the smell of fresh paint and hydraulic fluid. Tours gave her thumbs up from the tarmac. She returned it and taxied to the runway, engines spinning up, weapons loaded, promise renewed. This time 2 other A-10’s flew with her, wingmen. They'd volunteered specifically to fly with Revenant, said they wanted to learn from the best. She briefed them carefully, emphasizing communication and mutual support. Stay visual with me, call out threats, cover each other's six, and if I call RTB, you RTB. No heroes. We all come home or none of us come home. They acknowledged, and the 3-ship formation lifted into the dawn, heading east toward mountains that held Americans who needed help. The radio crackled with traffic. The mission brief scrolled across her display. The routine continued, but something felt different. She realized what it was when her wingman, a lieutenant named Hayes, came up on the private frequency. Ma'am, permission to speak freely. Go ahead, Hayes. I just wanted to say it's an honor to fly with you. We all know what you did. We all know what you stand for. So whatever happens today, we've got your back. That's a promise. She felt something catch in her throat, felt the isolation she'd carried for 3 years crack slightly. Copy, Hayes. Let's go earn that honor. The valley waited. The enemy waited. But for the first time since Syria, she wasn't alone. 3 warthogs against whatever darkness gathered below. 3 pilots who understood that the mission was everything and coming home was secondary, but bringing each other home was paramount. She armed her weapons and descended into the valley with wingmen she trusted, and for the first time believed that maybe, just maybe, the math could work out differently. The battlefield went quiet as they approached. Then 3 GAU-8 cannons spoke simultaneously. The sound rolled across the mountains like thunder from a mechanical god. The enemy learned a new lesson that day. 1 was a disaster. 3 was apocalypse. By the time they finished, the convoy was secured, Casualties were minimal, and all three warthogs climbed away together, formation intact, promise kept. That evening in the debrief, Colonel Briggs watched them with something like amazement. "You three flew like you've been together for years, like you could read each other's minds." Hayes spoke up. "Sir, we just followed Revenant's lead. She showed us what's possible when you refuse to accept bad outcomes." Briggs looked at Kowalski. "Captain, I'm putting you in for instructor duty. We need more pilots who think like you, who fly like you, who understand that the mission isn't just delivering ordnance, it's bringing people home." She wanted to refuse, wanted to stay in the cockpit where things made sense. But she looked at Hayes and her other wingman, Captain Rodriguez, and saw younger versions of herself, hungry to prove something, desperate to matter. She thought about Patterson's mockery turned to respect, thought about Tor's hands keeping her alive through maintenance miracles, thought about Paulson's grandfather's coin, still in her pocket, thought about all the pilots who'd never get the chance to learn these lessons because nobody taught them. "Yes, sir, I'll do it." And Revenant became more than a call sign, became a promise, became a standard, became the legend whispered in ready rooms where young pilots gathered and wondered if they had what it took, became the story told when someone doubted whether courage was enough, became the answer to the question every warrior secretly asks: what happens when everything goes wrong and nobody is coming to help? The answer was simple: you keep flying, you keep fighting, you keep the promise, and you never ever leave anyone behind. Even when the math says you should. Especially then.